of meet several times, or you all read it and then met once and kind of talked about it? Was that the process?
That's mainly what we did, although we had a book club's account. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit, but I don't have one.
Bookclubs.com.
Yeah.
Clubs with a Z. So we did a book club account, and so once a week I would take some of the discussion points that had been in our guide that we had, and then, pose that as a question on the message board, and then I would answer it for myself. And so people had a chance, if they wanted to write in, what they were thinking about. So I kind of took the book and broke it down into 4 weeks. And then we had one meeting after everyone had finished the book, and we met for almost 2 hours one night. So we had a lot of really good discussion. And Imogene right there, you see, that was her first Zoom session she'd ever done.
It was.
Wow.
I told you that was another indicator that I've always been a risk taker.
Yes.
I'd been in conferences before just as a listener, but not an actual participant. But that was fun. Very, very, very fun.
Have you done any other Zoom sessions since we met? Or is this your second one?
Uh-huh.
You have done other ones?
It's such a significant topic of all the sessions that we've been in, so many of us, I'm sure, all of our lives. I don't recall being in a session with this particular emphasis, and I think it is so important. So that's what really motivated me to participate.
Well, good. That's so good to hear.
And Laura, just to compliment Kim, I mean, she has really been tremendously organized and had handouts for us to make sure we were working through the book. And I really think she's done a stellar job as our leader.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's true.
I'll second that. She does everything to the T. It's perfect all the time. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, you sent over your study guide. I thought, this is great. This is incredible. So very good. And Beverly, where are you joining us from?
I'm here in Auburn. I'm a faculty member in Auburn.
Nice. Good to see you, Greg.
Good to see you, Laura. You doing all right?
Yeah, doing good.
Surviving this COVID stuff, huh?
Exactly. Quarantining on the boat.
Yeah, but you're doing some traveling.
Same boat you were on?
Sorry.
But you're doing some traveling too, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is the same boat. So I've been getting around a little bit, just, checking out New Hampshire and like Nantucket and,
right
around there. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. And anyone who comes in can come in late. And we are recording this, so any of our other book club members who had wanted to take part but couldn't, we'll have it recorded, and so they can watch the recording later. Thank you very much, Laura, for being with us today. This was our first attempt at a book club, and we thought it was a perfect book for us to use for this session. So we really appreciate you being willing to join us today. And I thought I would just do a little brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. And I know you were going to share some slides with us maybe, and then we can have an open discussion or questions, however you want to go forward. Will be fine with us. So
Right. Sounds good.
So y'all heard us talk about Laura Roser. She is the CEO and founder of Paragon Road, and I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about it, but it's a company that focuses on legacy planning, by helping people discover and document their beliefs, stories, philosophies, and principles to pass on to their families, employees, or communities. Laura is a graduate of the University of Utah, and she is a writer, entrepreneur, marketing consultant, artist, and speaker. And we're just thrilled that she was willing to join us for this session, because she's usually, I think, speaking in front of a pretty big crowd. So thank you very much, Laura. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here, and pretty cool that this whole Zoom thing, right, Imogene? that we can talk and have this discussion. But I'm honored that you chose my book for your book club. And if you don't mind, if it's slightly interactive, so did everyone read the book that's on right now? Did you all read the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. That's good, because that was my first, do you need an intro to the book or anything? So that's good. So I kind of want to take this where you would like to take it. I don't know if you had additional questions and things like that on the book, or as you've been working through it, or if you kind of went through that already with, Kim's incredible guide, to the book. I thought it was really wonderfully done. I also prepared some slides about work that I've been doing currently, which is kind of more about how you actually make your legacy tangible. And I find like a very interesting thing to do right now, especially with COVID and where everyone's self-isolating and has a little bit more time or time with family, which is capturing your own stories, capturing family stories, and how you actually go about doing that. So I can jump right into that, or we can talk a little bit more about the book, your experience, and any questions that you might have. What are your thoughts?
I'd say jump in.
All right, let's do it. Okay. So now the big question here is, if I share my screen, is it going to work? Is it working?
Yes.
All right, that is good. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about making your legacy tangible. And have any of you done anything to kind of do that? I know I talk about it in the book. So there's things like creating your family coat of arms, or creating videos, or posting blog posts about your stories, or things like that. Has anyone kind of done anything like that?
The closest I've come is I wrote a blog as we were building our house, just to document our 6 months of what it was like when my kids were little to build our house. But I haven't really told my life story.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm doing a Shutterfly book of my life and my mother, stories about my mom. She's still living, and so I'm still getting some information that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And her parents, and my dad who's deceased, and just kind of personal stories about him, and special memories and things. And hopefully that will, and I'm going to make that a Christmas gift. I have 5 grandkids.
Oh, that's incredible.
And my first day of school, and those kinds of stories too. So
very nice.
I think I mentioned before about the importance of my family reunions, my annual get-togethers on both sides of my family, my mother's family and my father's family. We've had planned reunions for years and years and years and years. On one side, I think about the 97th, and on the other side, more than 50. And each time we gather that way, and both of them are in the month of December, we share a lot of pieces, a lot of information. We have display tables, that kind of thing. We print a little directory every year. There are all kinds of activities going on that relate very, very closely and so significantly to my family. And part of what this has prompted me to be more aware of is how we begin to, at this point, maybe make all of that more tangible in fewer pieces, how we collect and put it together. And we've done that in smaller ways, but for the younger people in our family, for children and teenagers growing up, for them to see in a highly visible way the history, the significant pieces, the major timelines. So that has really prompted me. We have a lot of material, but as in a lot of situations, it's how we organize it and make it accessible, readily accessible to all these different age groups. So I'm very excited about the possibility of exploring those possibilities.
Very nice. You have a big family, Imogene.
I really do. I mentioned before that I'm from a very, very small immediate family, and then I have large numbers of events for a long, long time, and I have files of information readily available, and we share different pieces of that. So I'm very fortunate to have a lot of material, and I think the challenge is to how we put all that together and, as I said, make it more accessible to particularly the younger people in our family.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be talking a little bit more about that actually coming up. Anyone else kind of done anything?
And I would just add, from a very personal point of view, I really enjoyed the chapters having to do with the personal mission statements and the family mission statements. And I've been really thinking through some of all of that. I know when we meet people and introduce ourselves, we generally say, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I've been doing, and this is what I'm all about. But again, we often don't have that in a condensed, formal kind of a statement. We kind of know it, certainly by the time you reach my age, we know what we've been about, but to reflect on it and to get it written, there's something powerful to me, just and as an English teacher type, I guess it would be, but there's something powerful about the writing experience itself. There's a level of precision and commitment that comes with getting it in writing. So that's another thing that I'm excited about and currently thinking about.
Yeah, I love that.
But that was and all the examples that you gave in the book, that was very, very helpful, very poignant.
Good. Well, thank you. Yeah, I often tell people that I have no idea what I'm thinking until I write it down. You know, it helps me to process my thoughts. But so that's interesting. So have you been writing down, crafting your mission statement?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty much here and here, but as I said, there's something, it's almost like a commitment or a recommitment or a growing awareness of, you know, I'm always talking about trying to be a lifelong learner and a lifelong servant, that it's all about continuing to learn and grow and to serve and make something better. But in addition to getting that down, then you begin to think, exactly how am I doing that? What are the strategies, the follow-up strategies that enable us to follow through and truly make that difference?
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, those are some of the reasons that I was attracted to this topic to begin with, and the book certainly did not disappoint. You did a great job clarifying and detailing and providing examples and motivating people to really think who we are and what we're about and how we are making a difference. You did a great
Yeah.
job with the book.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I've found, you know, in working with a lot of people that can become their compass, you know, in terms of who they are and who their family is. And it's interesting because, you know, on the surface, it maybe doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but once you have that statement down and once you refer to it regularly, it actually kind of starts programming your choices, and you know, it's very easy, I think, to veer off as a parent or as anyone, right? Like you just get busy, life gets in the way, and so it's very easy to veer off, and then you reach the end of your life and kind of wonder what happened and what did I actually represent, and you know, did I represent when I wanted to? So I think it's one of the most powerful things that anyone can do.
It is. It truly is.
Well, thank you. So does anyone have any other thoughts or things that they're doing to capture their legacies? All right, well, to kind of Imogene's point, and also I'm going to look up your Beverly, who you're putting together the book, which is so cool. I'm excited to show you this book that one of our clients actually put together, that is kind of along the lines of what you're doing. But let's look at what people actually want to know. So this is kind of interesting, because I think, you know, a lot of times you say, oh, you know, I'll talk to people and say, your stories are so important, and it's so important that your family, you know, knows about their heritage and everything. And then they say, well, I try to talk to my family. I try to sit down with them and, you know, tell them these stories, and they won't listen to me. Or I don't know what stories to tell them. What's interesting about my life? There's nothing interesting about my life. So I think a lot of people, you know, have those kinds of concerns or aren't aware, but this is pretty interesting. So this survey was conducted by Ancestry.com, and this is what Americans want to know about their grandparents. So they interviewed a ton of people, and this is what they said. They want to know, the number one thing they want to know is stories of when they were young. So they want to know about what it was like growing up and their childhood and all of that. Number two, want to have childhood memories. So that's 62% of people. Number three, where your family came from. So your heritage. Number four rather, your heritage. And then number five, life advice. And as you have kind of talked with your family, how many of you have, I guess, really spent the time to tell them the stories of your life versus you just don't really talk about it much? Can anyone kind of speak to that?
Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I talk about it all the time because for some reason, my 8-year-old daughter loves to ask me about when I was growing up. So I'm not that far removed from her yet, but I feel like I talk about my childhood a lot, and it makes me feel good that she's got that point of reference already, even at 8.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I think I talked about this a bit in the book. It really gives, especially kids, a sense of place and a foundation. And so, you know, when they know these stories about their past, they just do better. They do better in school. They do better behaviorally. They have better self-esteem. And so it's really helpful for them. And does anyone have sort of those issues? Like, are you able to kind of reel out your stories easily, or is it hard for you to remember the past and, you know, sort of dredge up those stories of your childhood?
I was actually commenting to a friend last night on the phone about how writing my childhood stories brought them back to life. I didn't even think I really remembered things from my childhood very much. And so getting the pictures and then starting. It was really good to kind of relive some of those memories that way.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that. So there's this guy who does a lot of work with guided autobiography. So basically it's helping people tell their life stories. But anyway, he talks about memory priming and how it's very important. And we do a lot of this work with our company, but how it's very important to, start to ask questions that will help you remember the past. Because otherwise it's hard to, come up with that. And so like Beverly, like if you're looking at photos, right, that'll start to trigger some memories. Or if you start talking about, oh, I went to this elementary school, and then you start thinking about, well, who are the friends that I went to elementary school with? Then it starts taking you down a path of remembering, these stories. And any other comments?
I think family photographs do a lot to help trigger questions about that. I've always considered myself a kind of a visual learner, and just seeing photos of people and places. And I know recently with this additional in-home time, I've been going through a lot of photographs, and I can testify that it really does evoke so many memories, and that leads to sharing and just a lot of conversations, even on a personal level. I recently pulled some old photographs of my graduation at Auburn in 1963, and then fortunately, thanks to God and so forth, I've had good health and was able to attend my 50th year activity. So putting those pictures side by side and that kind of thing just evokes so many memories, and seeing photos of my parents about that. So whether it's a family activity or a very special occasion, I think photographs do a lot to help us in that area.
Thank you. So I want to show you kind of this book I've been talking about, if I can find it, just to give you some ideas on how you can format sort of these family memories. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I find for a lot of people, it's just having the idea, right? It's just kind of jogging their memory or their brains. And so what I find in the work that we do a lot of times is just seeing examples will really help you to come up with some really interesting things about your life. Or we do a lot of groups where we do smaller groups, have 6 or so people tell their family stories, and that will also help. So if you think about that as well, like if you're with a group of friends or or your grandkids or whoever, where you start to tell stories back and forth, that helps to get those juices flowing, because maybe someone will tell a story about their grandmother who used to make them macaroni and cheese all the time, and then that reminds you of the story of, oh yeah, my grandma used to do that for me all the time too, and plus she used to always buy me Captain Crunch, or whatever it is. So that really helps to start kind of uncovering these stories. But if we look at this book, I wanted to show you a few things of kind of what we did here. And this book was designed by a woman who is doing something very, very similar to you, Beverly. She actually interviewed her mother and created this book about her mother, primarily about her mother, a little bit about herself. And it was just so cool. So a few things I just wanted to point out is as we're going through this book. And this is back to your point, Emma Jean. How do you create something that is accessible to younger people, right? And so, I mean, they could have tons of stories and tons of family history that they can wade through. But what I find is it's very important to keep things short and sweet, keep the stories short and sweet, to access the next generation or the younger generation, and to have a lot of visual elements. So something that will pull them in visually. So that's what we try to do with our work. And you know, and I'm showing this more of an example. Like, you can do this on your own as well. But I want you to get the idea of how you can format these sorts of things to be really engaging for your family. Because I know with this book, her family has just loved this book. And so, so you'll see like her stories are short. They're just like a few paragraphs typically. And you have photos, you know, from her family. So this is like a picture of where her mother was born. And then there's this story, and you have a captivating headline, and then some writing about you know, what happened, and then a little bit about the year that she was born, and a stamp from that year, and the things that were going on, right? So the average cost of a new house was $6,700, which everyone wants to go back to that time, right? The average wages and everything. And so that's, you know, kind of some interesting things. Then you have the timeline of her life, and a very small family genealogy type chart. And then just little different mementos and stories that go along with that. So I think as you start to put together these stories about your life, you want to think about how they can be visually represented and something that's really intriguing to your family. She in particular had a ton of sort of little items she had saved over the years. So that was pretty cool, because she put in all these little memento photos and things about her life. But we've also had people to do it that have hardly anything photo-wise, you know, about their lives. But they have these great stories. And so the stories stand on their own with, you know, we'll use just pictures that kind of represent what they're talking about, and then headlines that captivate. And so something like this I found to be very, very accessible to the younger generation, because it's very easy to read this tiny story about this shiny red handbag and can be really meaningful, rather than reading like this huge biography that isn't broken up, you know, with different headlines and different photos and things. So so I wanted to give you that as kind of an example. And then let me go back. I'm not going to go through the full book, but if you do want to see it, it's on our website, and I can send you a direct link as well that Kim can send out to everyone. But let's go back to my slideshow. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what makes a story good. And because this is an interesting thing, right? There's a certain amount that your kids are going to be excited about. But then after a while, when you start talking about, you know, the details of on your prom dress in high school, and you start talking about all these little things, they're going to start looking off into space and, you know, losing interest. And so let's talk a little bit about what makes a story good, or what makes it captivating. So there's 5 principles for creating great stories. And the first principle is you are the illustration. So what do I mean by that? What I like to do is have this simple formula when you're talking about a story. This story is about blank, and the illustration is blank. And so let me show you how that kind of works. So here's some examples. And the first example is a little bit too broad. So this story is about hardship, and the illustration is about my upbringing. So that's a little bit too broad. But this one's a lot better, because it's a lot more specific. This story is about poverty being a mindset, and the illustration is the time I went to the store with my father and felt embarrassed. Or the story is about integrity, and the illustration is when my mother drove 200 miles to return a woman's coat that she mistakenly took. Now, the reason why this is so important is because there's a certain amount of biography information that your kids are always going to want, and they're always going to be interested in. But basically, your stories are valuable to them, or to anyone you're telling your stories to, because they represent bigger truths, right? So So in other words, they are learning about integrity through this story. So so you're telling them about, you know, this time that your mom drove 200 miles to return this woman's coat that she took by accident. And that story in itself is really valuable to them because it's teaching them about the principle of integrity, right? So it's teaching them a broader principle that they can apply to their lives. And so the more that your stories can kind of fit in with these broader principles, the more that your family or anyone you're telling the stories to will be able to apply it to their lives. And let me know as I'm going through this if you have questions or anything. But hopefully this is making sense. And, you know, and I didn't want to turn this into like a huge educational thing. I'm going through just a few points because, you know, I could go on for hours and hours about storytelling and about creating these pieces and legacy vehicles and things. But I think having a few of these principles in mind as you're going about archiving your life and as you're talking to family members, you know, maybe you're interviewing your parents or you're talking to your kids or grandkids, that this will help you to be able to really solidify these kinds of really meaningful legacy creations. So whether it's a video or a book or a blog post that you're putting together. So principle number 2 is pick out the tiny details. And think here about turning points in the story, think about moments that are meaningful, and think about the small details that jump out to you. And these are the things that people hold on to with stories. So if it's kind of a generic story, you know, about we fell in love and we got married at the church and it was beautiful. That's something that they're just it's gonna melt away. It's very common. They're not going to remember it. But if you start talking about really specific things, we fell in love and you know, it was a funny date because he dipped his tie in soup. And so his tie was stained the whole time and he didn't think I'd kiss him. And you know, those sorts of things start to add flavor to the story and get people really involved in what you're talking about. So what you want your details to be is you want them to be small, you want them to be unusual, the first time that I've ever heard it, so you want it to be something that's novel, and you want it to be something that's narrow or relating to the specific event. So let's look at a couple examples. So here's one. Lily kept a pristine stuffed bear on her desk to remind herself of the day she truly felt she had pleased her father. Or I grabbed my octopus umbrella and headed into the hurricane, right? So these are very little details. I mean, we could just say about Lily that she, you know, that her father was hard to please. You know, her father was very strict. He was hard to please. But this teddy bear starts to represent that. And it's something that you hold on to, that your mind holds on to, this pristine stuffed teddy bear. And then, you know, if I grab my octopus umbrella and headed out into the hurricane, that's something you hold on to too. You know, I could have just grabbed my umbrella, but the octopus umbrella kind of gives it a little bit more flavor. And those sorts of things will really bring out the beauty of your stories and have people really hook on to them and remember them. So when you're thinking of your stories, think of those just tiny details that make all the difference. All right, so principle number 3. You need a hook. So what am I talking about here? Everyone has ADD, right? Everyone has, they're off and have their apps and their phones. And so you want to hook them as soon as possible. You want to hook them within the first 10 seconds. You want to get in at the last possible moment and out at the last possible moment. So, you know, people a lot of times will have a tendency to sort of meander around before they get to a story, but you want to get in at the moment that's most interesting or most intriguing, and then think of a fantastic first line. Now, this advice is good if you're writing your story or if you're trying to take like a video of a very specific story, but sometimes you also are exploring what you know or about your past, and that's different. in that you can kind of meander all over the place. So if you're kind of exploring with your family, or you're talking through your memories, or you're interviewing your father or something like that, you can meander around, because of course you have to do that to remember your memories, right? You have to ask a bunch of questions. But once you turn it into an actual story, or you actually put it in a book, try to think of this. Try to think of what's an interesting first line, or what's something that would really hook your audience. So, for example, here's an example of boring first line. When I was a kid, I used to love to play outside. Here's something that's more engaging. If you really want to tick your father off, jump off the roof, right? So there's nothing terrible about the first one. When I was a kid, I used to love to play, but the thing is, millions of people could say this, right? And it's not very novel, and it's not something that hooks you immediately. But saying something like, if you really want to tick off your father, jump off the roof, you know immediately that you're in for a fun time, and you're immediately intrigued on what happened to this person, or what did they do. So try to think of how you could engage them in that way. All right, principle number 4 is that the story must be intriguing the entire time. And so what you want to do is there's 3 main things here. You want specific details, and it's interesting because a lot of times people don't know what's interesting about their own lives. And so a lot of times it takes actually talking to friends or talking to other people to discover what's interesting. So what might be normal to you could be really interesting to someone, where you say, oh, well, when I was a kid, I lived on a farm and I used to milk the cows, and whoever you're talking to might say, what are you talking about? How do you milk cows? That's really interesting. And you think it's boring because, you milk cows every day, but it's details that they want to hear. So it might take a little bit to understand what's interesting about your life. And, that could just be sitting down with the grandkids and kind of like probing a few areas and seeing what lights them up or what's interesting to them. Because, it could be like a cassette tape is interesting, right? Like, what do you mean a cassette tape? I've never heard of that before. So the second thing is show, don't tell. And that has to do with, it's a common thing in writing that they tell you to do. So instead of saying that the girl was very sad and she felt horrible that day, or saying I was very sad, I felt horrible that day, you could show that you're very sad. So I cried all day. I mean, that's or you can tell, or yeah, you can show you're very sad. So I cried all day, or I stayed in bed all day. That's more of a showing versus telling, if that makes sense. And then the third thing is follow a story arc. So you want twists and turns to the journey. So it's like a fun, interesting journey that's going on. So let's look at a few examples here. So the first one is kind of boring, right? And let's look at why this is boring. So we have, my mother was a great motivator. And the reason why this is boring is it's general, there's no specific details, and it's telling versus showing. So you're telling everyone your mom was a great motivator. This is something that's a lot more interesting. My mother used to sing me awake in the mornings. I would cover my ears and yell, no, but she wouldn't stop until I was out of bed. This is a lot more specific. This is showing versus telling. You're still showing that she's a great motivator, but you're giving like an actual example of how she motivates in this very annoying way. And so it's something that will stay with the person a lot longer. All right, so this is a typical story arc. And just to give you an idea of how stories kind of work. And so when you're thinking of your stories, think about like, what is the peak? What are the interesting details that get you to the peak? And then what is the resolution? So if we look at the story of Cinderella, we could say the conflict is that Cinderella wants a better life, right? So if in your stories you have some kind of conflict, and usually the conflict is basically just what you want. So like, when I graduated from high school, I really wanted to go to this certain college. And so what was the journey to getting to that college, right? What steps did you have to take to be able to go to the college or to graduate? So it's typically what you're looking for or what you want to do. The themes for this are hope, faith, do good, and you'll be watched over. And then you have the setting is the home of the stepmother and the palace. And by the way, if you want if you want this story arc worksheet, I can email it to Kim, and you can, she can send it out to you, because it's one of the things that we use kind of in my courses and things. So I'd be happy to send that out to you if you're interested. The characters are Cinderella, her father, her stepsisters, her stepmother, the prince, and the fairy godmother. And then here's the rising action. So this is what happens to Cinderella, right? Her father dies. The stepmother is evil. She gets invited to the ball, and then the fairy godmother intervenes because she's, doesn't have a beautiful dress or anything to wear. And then the climax is Cinderella goes to the ball and she leaves fast and she loses her shoe. And then the resolution is the prince searches for her with the shoe, right? He tries it on all the eligible women and he finds her and they live happily ever after. So what you'll find is with the resolution, it's not immediate. Like, it's usually a little bit better if there's a little bit of pain involved. Like if she just lost her shoe and then the prince found her immediately, it wouldn't be as interesting as the prince searching for her even more, and you being on the edge of your seat while the prince tries to find her and put on, and find this woman, put on her shoe, and they live happily ever after. So think about that when you're telling your stories. Think of ways to kind of where it twist and turned, and things that got in your way that were obstacles to you reaching your goal. And then here's the first line. Did you know there's a hidden message in the story of Cinderella? Now, the reason why I use that first line is because everyone knows the story of Cinderella. And so starting off with once upon a time would be something that would be kind of mundane and that you would expect. And so starting off with, did you know there's a hidden message? It instantly makes you interested in hearing, well, what is the hidden message? All right, so question about story arcs. Do you always have to have a story arc? No, stories can be fun and humorous. They can be there for bonding, or they can just be interesting biographical information. So you could just be talking about the school you went to, or what family life was like around the kitchen table, or things like that. But when you can have some of these stories with a story arc, it can make them really fun and interesting for your family. All right, principle number 5, this is the final principle. Speak from the heart. So don't get, okay, this is going to disappear. Don't get overly worried about the rules. If your stories get too formulaic, or you're worrying too much about the story arc or the tiny details or whatever else, you can get robotic or things can feel stunted. So make sure you're speaking from the heart. But these are some principles that if you just kind of keep in mind, can be really helpful when you're writing your stories or telling your stories. And one thing that I've learned to be really, really helpful in mapping out your life. So if you're ever interested in creating a book like the one I showed you, or writing the individual stories of your life, which I think is an incredible thing to do, either just to get sort of your own life journey solid in your own mind, and then also to pass them on to your family. This is one of the best ways I found to do it, because it can be very, very, very daunting to say, oh, just write up your life memoir. What I've found is it's better to map out your life and then write specific stories that that are individual to you. So you don't have to write, like if we look back at, or if you remember what the book was like that we just looked at, the stories were very short. I mean, they were 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. They weren't really long stories. So if you can find like 10 stories about your life that were very, very impactful, and this is going back to that term of master stories from in the book. These are the turning points in your life, or things that really stood out to you that made a difference in your life and the decisions that you made, or in describing how your family was, you know, the kind of culture your family had, that sort of thing. If you can go through and you can identify those stories and write up, you know, have a goal of writing up 10 stories about your life. And again, short stories, 3 paragraphs long, that will be so incredibly valuable for your family. So here is the easiest way I found to do this. And I noticed on Kim's study sheet, it was great because she has a life timeline on there. So you could even just go back to her study sheet and look at the life timeline and map it out there. I love that you did that, Kim. But these are the 4 questions that you want to ask yourself. And this will make sense in the next slide. The first question is, what are fun times and passions that I have? Second question is challenges and lessons learned. Third is heroes, mentors, and friends. And then 4th is favorite memories of loved ones. So let me show you how this works. So here's your timeline of your life, right? And so you got your date born and all the way to today's date. So if you just start filling it in with basic moments in your life that were pretty significant. So we'll say your date born was August 1st of 1961. And then your brother was born, you went to elementary school, junior high, high school, you had your first real job, you went to college, you got married, your son was born, your daughter was born, your parents had their 50th anniversary, and then you had 20 years in your own business and a trip around the world. So this is kind of what someone's life looks like. So then what you want to do is you want to ask yourself these 4 questions for each part of your life. And this is really cool how this works. So let's look at how this works if you were looking at elementary school. So this period of when you are in elementary school, if you started asking yourself, okay, what were the fun times and my passions when I was in elementary school? What challenges did I have and what lessons did I learn? Who were my heroes and mentors and friends? And then what are the memories that I have of loved ones during this specific time in elementary school? So for this person, the first one, fun times and passions, are making tree forts with friends and summers in Bear Lake and playing chess with grandpa. Right? For their challenges and lessons learned, they had their appendix out and they punched a bully in the face. For the third thing, for heroes, mentors, and friends, their dad was their hero or their mentor, baseball coach, and their best friend, Ryan. And then the 4th thing is memories of loved ones. So this person in elementary school remembers their mom made their clothes, dad helping with the science fair project, and reading to their little brother. And so you'll see that all of those can be their own stories. And so if you do that for each part of your life, what you'll find is that you can make up a list of all of these stories that you can come up with. And like I said, if you make up a list of the top 10 stories that you want to write about and you just start writing about them, that is one of the best ways I've found to actually start archiving your life. And of course you can go more elaborate and make a huge memoir that's hundreds of pages. But I think for your family and for starting out, those 10 stories are so valuable. So that is, if I was going to do anything with my legacy other than what Emma Jean said, which is come up with a legacy statement and, a family mission statement, this is what I would do. I would come up with these stories that are most important to you. And if you want to help your parents do this or, your loved ones, same thing. Come up with these stories that are really influential and share them with your family. All right, guys, that is my teaching segment done. Do you have questions or want to talk more about this or the book or anything else?
Before you leave that topic, I wanted to commend you on that Barclay quotation. That is a great statement that you had on that page, that quotation from William Barclay.
Ah, thank you.
One thing I thought about.
You're too good.
Sorry, go ahead, Beverly.
No. This was just really good because I'm working, I've got the pictures and just really kind of thinking about how to craft the stories. I'm a finance professor, not a writer.
Very good.
She gave you a formula though, so just fill in the blanks. One thing that I really thought about while you were talking about this is J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. And when she talked about writing Harry Potter, she didn't want to just tell you that they went to a restaurant and they ate soup. The way that she described the soup, you could almost taste it as you were reading about it. And so the idea of, if you're writing stories about, recipes that your parents or your mom passed down to you or your grandmother, to think about not just including the recipe, but the sights and smells and feelings surrounded that item that you're cooking.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. Where you can taste it and you can experience it. Exactly. Those are the sorts of things that make stories great. Because, at the end of the day, Harry Potter is just like a lost kid. Without all the detail that she put in there, it really wouldn't be an interesting story. And I love that. I love that example of her. Thank you, Kim.
Laura, what prompted you to get involved in this particular topic?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think I talked a little bit about it in my book, but it's, a lot of it has to do with a personal journey. I think it's, I've always had sort of a close family, and my mother, or not my mother, but my grandmother actually did things like, she was very into archiving family things, and I've been very grateful to her for that. But for me specifically, the thing that prompted it was when I was meeting with a lot of different financial advisors, and one of the guys said, we have a process to help you pass on your wisdom and values to your kids. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. And I went and met with him, and it turned out to be a pitch for whole life insurance. It wasn't, he didn't actually have a process at all. So it was kind of a bait and switch thing, but it made me actually start to think about it, how a lot of people really focus on their financial assets and only the financial aspects of their lives. And so, my background is, years ago, I started up a marketing company, and then I had as a part of that, I had a publishing company. So we did magazines and books and things like that. And so I started looking at it from that lens. Like, if I was going to pass on my legacy or my wisdom and my values, how would I actually do that? How would I make something like that tangible? And so that's kind of the lens that I look through. And then I started researching all kinds of things. So I started talking to all kinds of people about what they do for their legacies in all kinds of different areas. So in the financial world, in the writing, world, and the psychological or the religious world. And here I am. I've been going on this journey and coming up with.
Well, congratulations to you. You have truly made a contribution.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm just going to hang out here with you, Imogene, because you're awesome.
Well, I want to say, and this was not planned, by the way, but my dad dropped by the house during this, and so he has been participating with us today. You say hi.
Hey.
So this is not only his very first experience with any kind of Zoom, but it has already started some good conversations with us. Just see.
Good.
Just
good.
To come by today. So this was great.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think when you start coming up with these stories, or some of the most important things that these stories can do, or is not necessarily, like, it's not necessarily the stories that you're archiving, even though they're important. It's the kind of conversations that you have, right? So it's the kind of conversations that they spark, and the relationships that you create with your family, right? Because when you start talking about how you learned about integrity, or the time that, you know, your first date or whatever else with your kids or with your grandkids, you just create these really much deeper relationships.
Okay,
I
that
think
sounds
it's
good.
so
Take
important
care. Love you. Bye.
and you know, so special. So I would say start talking to your family and bringing up these sorts of things, because, I mean, you know, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah. She's talking to everybody. I've already learned one thing. You were talking about showing and not telling. And he said he took a tire into class one time to demonstrate. What'd you demonstrate? How
How it was made.
Oh, how it was made, because he used to work at Uniroyal. So that was something I never knew. So you're teaching us about ourselves.
Cool.
This sounds like English 101 all over again, where you show instead of just telling.
Hello.
It
All right,
works.
we had someone who participated in the book club, but I guess something came up and she wasn't
What
able to
I'm
be
gonna
here
tell
today.
you is my building.
Hang on, I'm gonna put Gail on mute. No, there we go. She is a fairly recent grad of Auburn and a newlywed. And when we had our discussion meeting, you know, it's really interesting to look at people who have read this and what they get from the book in different generations. So here she is, you know, she's probably going to live another 60 years. But as a newlywed, she said she really enjoyed the book, thinking about what does she want to do now before they even have children, to start thinking about what traditions that they want to carry on and new ones they want for their family. So to me, one of the neatest things about the book was how it can really apply at any stage of your life.
Absolutely. I love that. And I found that a lot too, which I love that people are thinking about that before they have kids or while their kids are young, because, you know, I mean, your legacy can be addressed at any time in your life, and it's never too late. However, you know, there's a certain point where your kids are pretty set with who they are. And so I love that, like, starting off when they're younger, really creating those family, you know, like the family mission statement and coat of arms and all of that with younger kids is so powerful. It's incredible. And it helps for them to really care about their legacies as well. Like create that, that kind of structure that they know that, you know, what they do is important and their character is important, and the family rules and things like that. So that's cool. That's wonderful to hear.
Does anyone else have anything they want to ask or share? We've been on for almost an hour now.
Hey, Laura, this is Greg. First off, thank you for doing this, because I'm in the process of creating a course and a program for donors. And this part about the discovery and the stories on the fun times, passions, challenges, lessons learned, all that really fits in extremely well with this next course I'm going to come up with, which is discovery for people to become better, more effective donors of self, of philanthropists.
Oh, good.
So I appreciate you sharing that, because it really got me thinking on how I was going to create the content in this discovery course. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Extremely valuable.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Greg.
I think you will motivate a lot of people just through the participation of this group. It's a wonderful conversation piece, and I think we can motivate not only ourselves, but a lot of people that we come in contact with. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Hey, Laura, you've been that little pebble in the pond with all these ripples, right? Showing, not telling kind of thing.
Exactly. That's what we all are, right? We
That's
all
right.
have our ripples.
Well, if we don't have anything else, I think we'll let Laura go. And I just want to again thank her for inspiring this book club and thank all of you for participating in it. And I hope one day when we can all be together again in person, we can have Laura come to Auburn and and let her meet some of y'all in person. So anyway.
I
Anything
would
else?
absolutely love that. Thank you, Kim, so much too. And it's been, I just thank you again. I feel honored and really appreciative.
Well, we loved it, as you can tell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
It's so good to see all of y'all. Y'all stay safe.
All right.
You
Let
too.
us know if there's
Bye.
anything we can do for you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye-bye.
Laura,
Bye-bye.
great book.
Thank you.
Thank
Laura,
you.
I would love to have you come to Auburn sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. I absolutely would love to.
I think just what you did on this presentation would be good for our big group meetings that we have. So once we can figure out when we'll all be able to see people in person one day.
Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it?
It is.
Keeps stretching out, but I'm hoping next year is going to be somewhat more normal.
I hope so. I hope so. And one thing I want to share with you, and Beverly and Imogene would both know this, and we talked about it during our discussion, is the Auburn Creed, which was written by one of our first professors, our first football coach. And we used that in a discussion about, you know, a family mission statement or a, not the mission statement, but the, anyway, I'm gonna send you that so you can read it, because it really connects with a lot of Auburn people and it fits perfectly in with what you're doing. So
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you again, both Laura and
Thank you so
Kim.
much.
Thank you.
good to see
Thank
y'all.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.